he takes is a miracle of survival.
No gimmicks, no dancing.
Is this Jack's nonchalance pushed to the limit, or did he just not realise how close he was to death? So how did they get him to do that?
The real challenge of this commercial was to take Jack, put him in lots of different death-defying situations. He's being crushed by this, or almost run over, or falling off that, and to really make people believe that he was there.
Ad men are always on at me to
For a lot of this, Daniel and the team used what's called chroma key. Jack is filmed in front of a plain blue background. Later, Daniel can replace the blue screen with any background he wants, like speeding cars.
To get this background, Daniel filmed 14 rally cars. He gave each car a number and then worked out the pattern and order in which they were to drive past the camera. Between the cars, there had to be just the right gaps for Jack to walk through. And to do that, Daniel carefully calculated the distance Jack would walk and the exact time it would take. This wasn't easy. The cars really were screaming along at 70 miles an hour, and each one had to appear to just miss Mr. D. But how did they get this shot without wrecking their camera?
Extra smooth taste.
Well, Daniel placed an angled mirror on the track and filmed the reflection of the truck. On film, it would seem as if the truck was hurtling straight at the camera, having picked up one of Jack's penguins on the way.
I told the stunt driver to drive up to the mirror at about 30 miles an hour and bump into the mirror. In fact, what he did was he put his foot down, went at 70 and smashed straight into the mirror. We decided that was the take we'd use because it wouldn't do another one.
I don't think it's enough to talk about its extra smooth taste.
Then, in post-production, special effects director Tim Webber took the shots of the speeding cars and of Jack walking in front of the blue screen and put them together. But this wasn't convincing enough. It still looked as if they almost cared about their star.
The real key to making the shot look dangerous was to add extra layers of cars once we'd superimposed Jack on the background. So within the computer we layered a number of cars on top of him, just behind him, just missing him, to give it that extra edge of danger.
To liven up my advertisement.
It's this layering technique that makes this shot so spectacular.
They just don't get it, do they?
It took several takes, but the tower of cars had to fall in exactly the same place every time. Otherwise, when Jack was added to the shot, it might look as though he'd been flattened. So the tower of cars were fastened to a reinforced metal pipe. At the bottom of the pipe, there was a fixed hinge. The hinge made sure the angle of the fall was always the same. The pipe made sure the cars were always anchored together.
Even though we knew where the tower was going to hit, it actually was quite dangerous, so we had to build a special crash box around the camera, and all the crew had to stand back, and when it hit the ground, it was like an earthquake.
When he worked on the shot, it was Tim's job to make Jack appear to be right inside the cars, not in front of them. So how did he do that? He used the process called layering. With his computer, he drew around every frame of the car roof. This gave him a matte, a moving black and white shape that exactly matched the outline of the falling car roof. Tim used this as a layer in front of Jack. Then he put the actual roof back in. So now Jack seems to be right inside.
If Jack was really standing underneath the tower of cars, they would have cast a large shadow over him. So we used the computer to darken Jack down so that it appears that the tower is actually falling on top of him. As a finishing touch, we then add a cloud of smoke as the cars crash down on the ground, which helps blend the whole shot together.
What we need's a bit of action, Jackie. They just don't get it, do they?
So after going to all that trouble, what's Daniel's favourite bit of the ad?
My favourite bit of the ad is a bit which actually nobody notices. It's when the pipe lifts up into the air, it swings towards the camera. We had to do a completely different shot, just the back of his head disappearing down the pipe. It's very subtle, but you really believe he's in that pipe.
Definitely no penguin.
And how about Tim?
in a pub.
My favourite bit of the commercial is when we added a seagull flying behind Jack as he's balancing on the girder. A lot of people wouldn't notice it, but it's the kind of touch that I really enjoy.
So, if this is a bit dull...
But I wonder if Jack enjoyed it all.
When Jack saw the final ad, it was a surprise to him because none of the backgrounds had been there when I filmed his bit. He's known for having a sort of straight-faced demeanour, and when he saw it, he actually went like this. So I think he did enjoy it, actually.
So you're going to put the pub background in afterwards?
Yeah, that's right, Jack. Yeah, we're going to put it in later.
Now here's an amazing rescue story. It's about an old reel of film that had been crumbling away in a shed for years. When it was rescued, it turned out that it was the oldest movie in Britain, an unbelievable 101 years old. The sad thing was, it was in ruins and completely unwatchable. But thanks to some incredible experts, it's been restored. And tonight, you'll see it like new. How did they do that? This is the British Film Institute's National Archive. It's a rich treasure house. On these shelves are some of the oldest films in the world. Although many early films have been lost or rotted away, these ones are safe and sound, or in most cases, safe and silent. In these air-conditioned vaults, there are over 300,000 of them, and many have been brilliantly restored, thanks to the team at the National Archive, headed by Dr. Henning Skow.
My father was a cinema operator, projectionist, and it's strange once you get celluloid in your blood, it tends to stay there. Because I love the medium, then it gives me tremendous pleasure to actually contribute to the long-term preservation of it, and I've learned a tremendous amount of history just from watching films.
The team don't have the resources to restore every old film they get, but they do examine each one to see if it's important. And in January 1995, a small rotting roll arrived. It had no title, nothing to identify it, but incredibly, once they'd done their work, the team knew exactly when and where it was filmed, and even who the cameraman was. How did they do that? Well, the National Film and Television Archive had made a TV appeal for old films. This one had been bought as part of a job lot at an auction. The owner had never even looked at it. Indeed, he was going to chuck it on a bonfire. Luckily, though, he sent it in. Like many of the films they deal with, it was scratched, faded, and covered in grime. And it had shrunk, so that it wouldn't fit any projector. Henning and the team thought this was a film worth restoring. What they didn't know was that it would turn out to be a jewel in their collection.
Like all early movies, this one had been shot on nitrate film. The trouble is, nitrate film is an unstable material. As it ages, layers of film can stick together, become brittle, and even crumble into dust. It's also highly flammable. The heat from just a projector bulb can make it burst into flames. So Henning and his team make sure all their nitrate films are safe from fire. They keep them in special refrigerated bunkers, with huge tanks above them holding 4,000 gallons of water.
Unless we really look after them and duplicate them, then they're going to self-destruct.
Before they make a copy of a film, they have to get the original into as good a condition as possible. First, they deal with the perforations. Those are the little holes at the sides of the film. On this film, many of the perforations were torn or missing, so the team patched them up with spares from other pieces of film. Next, all the damaged splices or joins in the film are mended. Then the film is cleaned. Normally this is done by machine, but many films are so fragile and valuable that they have to be done by hand. The archive has a priceless collection of early films showing previous generations at work and play. These films have to be painstakingly copied because the originals are so brittle they may disintegrate the first time they're projected. So, to make a copy, the team photograph the original one frame at a time onto a strip of new film. And they make sure each frame matches the one before. How? Well, to start with, this computer works out how much the next frame to be filmed needs to be made darker or lighter to match its predecessor.
When an old film shrinks, some frames shrink more than others, and the frames end up different sizes. This means that the picture would jump about on a screen. But the archive prevents this. First, they enlarge the least damaged frame onto a television screen. On the screen, they mark a set of essential reference lines. Using these marks, they can line up each frame in the correct position by hand.
After 6 months' work, it was time for the team to see exactly what they'd got. It was just over 40 seconds long. It was a horse race, but it was much more than that. What they'd rescued was the oldest datable film in British history.
Clearly it was the 1890s. It was clearly at the Derby. There was the grandstand of Epsom. I knew all that very well. I knew what the 1896 Derby looked like at the films of 97, 98, 98, 100. It didn't seem to be any one of those. It also had featured a close finish between 3 horses, and that's how the 1895 Derby finished. Although we don't have a photograph, there is a written description of when the film was shown in 1896, a year later, saying that there was a canter before the race, the finish, and then crowds pouring onto the course. And that's exactly what you get.
From his knowledge of early films, Look could even work out who the cameraman had been.
We had a dated picture of Bert Akers, the cameraman who took the film. As we know, 29th of May 1895. From that, we could work out where he was positioned, and the angle that he was filming at matches up with the film. And the camera he was using, we know it's the first motion picture camera used in this country. So from that evidence, we worked it out.
It was a 1,000,000-to-1 long shot. On the very centenary of British film, this 100-year-old treasure had been saved. Henning and his team had a winner.
I feel very privileged to be able to participate in this preservation process and pass on this heritage to future generations.
And it's a heritage that contains not just the great stars of early cinema, but priceless examples of the first time ever that our ancestors were captured as moving, living people.
Well, watching that film with us is literally